I never wanted attention, never needed applause. I'm the kind of man who finds satisfaction in quiet things. The smell of fresh lumber, the hum of a job done right, the pride in paying for something outright with honest work. For 22 years, I thought the greatest thing I ever built wasn't a house or a business, but a life with someone I trusted. Her name was Megan. I met her when I was 28, running a small crew out of Willow Creek, a no-frills town just west of Chicago. We were scraping by, me, two guys from high school, and a rusty old pickup that coughed like a smoker every winter. Megan was doing nails out of a folding chair in the back of a discount salon wedged between a vape shop and a payday loan place. She didn't have much, but she had a fire. She talked about owning her own spa someday. Something elegant, she said, with candles and stone sinks and my name on the front window. I believed in her, and I wanted to be the guy who made it real, so I started saving. I skipped the new truck, said no to nights out, took extra jobs laying concrete and hanging drywall in basements that smelled like old coffee. Every dollar I could stash went into a quiet pile labeled, someday. When she said she was ready, I didn't hesitate. We hunted down a wreck of a building on Elm Street, water damage, stained walls, electrical system so old it hummed when you flipped a switch. She wrinkled her nose. I saw potential. I ripped it down to the studs, hauled out garbage, sanded floors until my back gave out. When it was done, it didn't look like much from the outside, just a brick storefront tucked between a diner and a tailor shop. But inside it was pure serenity. Soft lighting, marble countertops, gold fixtures so clean you could see your future in them. And on the door, etched in silver, Megan and Company. Bah! She cried when she saw it, wrapped her arms around me and said, "You made me feel real." At the time, that meant more than money ever could. I never asked to be on the paperwork. It was her dream. I was just the guy who made the dream possible. Every screw, every tile, every bill, that was me. And I was proud of it. The first year was tough. Bookings were slow, and bills didn't wait. But we got through it. I'd stop in every few days to patch things up. A squeaky drawer, a leaky faucet. She always smiled, thanked me, kissed my cheek. I thought we were building something together. But in the third year, everything started shifting. She stopped waiting up for me, started dressing like she was going on camera instead of managing a spa. Her phone was glued to her hand, always angled away. I'd ask how business was. She'd give me a smile that didn't reach her eyes and say, "Fine." I knew something was wrong, but I didn't ask. I didn't want to see it. Then one night, she came home and dropped her purse on the counter like it weighed 50 pounds. "We need to talk," she said. I knew from her tone that this wasn't about a broken sink. "I want the spa to be mine, fully. No more help, no more maintenance. I've already brought in someone to help expand." I blinked. "You brought in who?" She hesitated. "Caleb. He's a branding strategist. We filed new paperwork last week." That name, Caleb Stone. I'd seen him. The kind of guy who wears too much cologne and calls everyone bro. I didn't scream. I didn't panic. I just said, "Okay, let's see how far you get without me." And that was it. That was the moment I stopped being her safety net. That was the moment I started paying attention. After that night, something inside me clicked off. I didn't yell. I didn't pack a bag. I didn't even sleep on the couch. I just observed. She thought I'd fade into the background. Patch a leak here, tighten a doorknob there. Keep fixing things like I always had. But I stopped being her handyman that night. Instead, I started thinking like a builder again. Not of homes, of exits. I've been burned before. Not like this, but in business. Early on, I got scammed by a subcontractor who walked off with half a deposit. Since then, I've kept backups. Documents. Copies. Fail-safes. Turns out those habits were about to pay off. A few days after that conversation, Megan left early for a client strategy lunch. I waited until the driveway was clear, then headed to the home office. There was one drawer she never touched. Old contracts, tax forms, stuff she thought was boring. Inside was a blue folder I didn't recognize. The cover said, MSC Enterprises. My chest tightened. Inside were pages I'd signed weeks earlier. She'd handed them to me during dinner one night, said they were for insurance updates. I didn't even read the top lines, just flipped and signed. Now I saw the truth. They weren't insurance forms. They were ownership transfers. She'd made herself sole proprietor of the spa and handed half the equity to Caleb. Not just the name or the brand, the equipment, the property lease, the client list, even the website domain. Everything I helped her build, she gave away. I stood there for a while. The room was quiet, but my head wasn't. I wasn't angry yet, not even sad, just clear. I grabbed my phone, made 3 calls. First, to Roy Walters, a business attorney I'd met on a job site 5 years ago. He's got a voice like a growl and a mind like a lockbox. Second, to Eli Thompson, my accountant. He's the type who can find a missing dollar in a pile of 10,000. Third, to Jordan Brooks, a loan officer at Willow Creek Community Bank. A man who once told me, "If your wife ever tries to take your business, call me first." I called him. "Jack," he said. Funny timing. Someone named Megan Carter just filed an account under MSC Enterprises. Co-signer, Caleb Stone. That confirmed it. They weren't just pushing me aside. They were laying the foundation to erase me completely. The next afternoon, I walked into the spa like nothing was wrong. Jeans, work boots, a little drywall dust on my sleeves. The girl at the front desk, Jenna, looked like she'd seen a ghost. "Megan in?" I asked casually. "She's in a meeting." "Perfect." I walked straight to the back. They were in her office. Megan was behind the desk. Caleb was leaned back in the guest chair, arms folded like he owned the place. He didn't even stand when I entered. "Megan," I said with a calm nod. "Got your text about the leaky pipe." She blinked. "Oh, I forgot I mentioned that." Caleb stood, extended a hand. "You must be Jack, the builder." I didn't take his hand right away. Let him sweat. "Caleb, right?" I finally said. "You licensed?" He laughed. No, I'm more strategy. Branding. I let the experts handle pipes." I nodded. "Hope your contractor's bonded. Code enforcement doesn't play around in this town." I let that sit in the air. Megan cleared her throat. "We've got it under control." "Sure," I said. "But you ever want it done right, you know where to find me." I turned to leave, but not before glancing at the printer tray behind Caleb. There, in black and white, was a new proposal. Spa number 2, funded with capital borrowed against our home. The home I paid off 10 years ago. I didn't take it, just noted the date. That night, I poured a drink, opened my old work ledger, and flipped to the names of every contractor, banker, supplier, and attorney I ever trusted. It was time to stop fixing things for her and start taking things back. Revenge isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just paperwork and silence. While Megan was off playing boss lady, snapping selfies under ring lights and tagging her spa's location like a badge of honor, I was planning. Carefully, quietly, and most of all, legally. The first move was simple: information. I called Eli, my accountant, and asked for a full dig into the past 3 years of spa finances. Not the version Megan showed me on Sunday nights when she was in a good mood. The real numbers. Eli oved me. And he didn't ask questions. Next, I met Roy Walters at a diner just off Route 9. We sat in the back booth, same place we met the day he helped me write my first LLC contract. Roy sipped black coffee and skimmed the documents I'd found in the drawer, the ones Megan tricked me into signing. "Classic shell move," he muttered. "You technically gifted them everything, but not with full disclosure," I said. He smirked. "Exactly. And that's where things get interesting." I left that booth with more than legal advice. I left with ammunition. Meanwhile, Megan kept living like she was untouchable. She came home less and less. When she did, she was all surface, fake smiles, distracted nods, checking her phone every 10 seconds. One night, she came in smelling like wine and lavender oil and told me she was meeting investors soon. That's when I made my next call to Jordan at the bank. "You were right," I told him. "They're coming for the house next." Jordan didn't even pause. "You want me to red flag the property?" "Not yet, but I need to know everything they filed. Every signature, every attached asset." He got it to me by morning. They had tried to use our home, fully paid in my name alone, as collateral for the second spa. They even listed it as MSC Enterprises' primary address. That was a mistake, because now, legally, they tied their business debt to property they didn't control. That's when I started the real work. First, I visited the spa during lunch. Jenna, the front desk girl, looked nervous again. "You sure you're allowed back there?" she asked. "I built the walls," I said. "Pretty sure I still know my way around." I headed to the back office. It wasn't locked, not even password protected. I found payroll logs, vendor invoices, supply orders. I took pictures of everything. I found a half-signed lease agreement for a second location. It wasn't ready yet, but the name on the bottom line? Caleb Stone. No license number. No contractor ID. Just his name scrawled like a kid forging a permission slip. They were building this fantasy on air. That evening, I made a stop at the county office, just to check some records, confirm that the expansion site Caleb was bragging about hadn't been approved. It hadn't. In fact, the zoning request was pending, missing half the required forms. Good. Then came a surprise. 2 days later, Jenna called me from a burner number. "Hey, I know I probably shouldn't be calling you," she said quietly, "but I thought you should see this." She sent a scan of a folder she found on the spa copier. It was a financial outline, revenue from the original spa being funneled into a new account. An account I'd never heard of. Name on the header, MSC Holdings. At the bottom, one line stood out like a warning flare. Proposed capital mortgage of residential property. That was it. My house, my future, being gambled behind my back. That night, Megan came home and said she was going out to dinner with potential collaborators. I nodded. Sounds exciting. She kissed my cheek like nothing was wrong. And while she was gone, I opened the safe in the garage, pulled out my backup drive, and started scanning files from the last 7 years. Every receipt, every invoice, every record of who really built that business. She thought I was done. She thought I was the guy she could outgrow. She forgot I was the one who laid every single brick. I didn't rush it. That's the trick to real payback patience. You don't swing wild. You wait, line up the shot, and let them walk right into it. Megan and Caleb thought they were building an empire. What they didn't realize is that the ground beneath it, that was me. My money, my signature, my foundation, and I'd started pulling up the nails. First thing I did was shut off the drip. The spa's monthly rent? It was still being paid out of an account I'd set up years ago, technically part of my construction business. Megan thought it was on autopilot. She hadn't looked in months, so I turned it off. Then I called the supplier line. Chairs, lighting, massage oils, all of it came through a commercial credit I'd opened using my contractor's license to get wholesale rates. I canceled the account. And finally, I contacted the building owner. His name's Harold Becker, owns half of Elm Street. We'd bonded a year ago after I fixed a foundation leak in his lake house. No charge. We met for coffee the next morning. He's a slow talker, big on eye contact. "She tried to renegotiate the lease last week," he said, stirring cream into his cup. "Wanted a longer term, lower rent." "Did you sign?" I asked. "Nope. Told her I needed to think on it." "Good. You're gonna want to see this." I handed him a file, public records. Caleb Stone's business history, 2 failed LLCs, 1 fraud claim, 1 ongoing civil case in DuPage County. All real, all verifiable. Harold read it quietly. "She's trusting this guy? More than she trusted me." He nodded. "Well, I won't be signing anything new." That's all I needed to hear. That night, Megan waltzed in around 10:30. Didn't notice the lock on my home office had been changed. Didn't ask why her credit card was declined at the beauty supply warehouse. She just poured wine, kicked off her shoes, and said, "We're close to finalizing the new spot." I said nothing, just smiled and took a sip of my beer. Inside, I was already 10 moves ahead. The next morning, I emptied our joint account. My half went straight into a new trust under my name alone. Legally airtight. Eli, my accountant, handled every detail. Megan wouldn't even know it existed until her balance hit 0. Then I filed a motion with the county to freeze the deed to our house. She'd never checked the fine print. It was never jointly titled. I owned it alone since before we got married. Now, thanks to Roy's help, it was moved to a private holding trust she had no access to. In other words, she couldn't borrow against it, couldn't use it, couldn't even list it without permission. She just didn't know it yet. A few days later, I got a surprise visit on site from one of the spa's former stylists, a young woman named Taylor. She looked anxious, clutching a manila envelope like it might explode. "I shouldn't be here," she said. "But you deserve to see this." Inside the envelope were scanned emails between Megan and Caleb, planning the expansion, talking about investors, even one thread joking about cutting Jack out for good. One line made my jaw tighten. "Don't worry, he's a builder, not a thinker. He won't even notice until it's done." I handed the folder back to Taylor. "Thank you," I said quietly. That was all I needed. The walls were starting to close in. Megan just didn't know she was the one inside the trap. I sent Roy a message that night. Just 3 words. "We're moving forward." He replied within minutes. Time to bring the hammer down. From the outside, nothing looked different. Megan still left every morning in designer heels. Still posted spa selfies with captions like, "Building empires," and "Hustle and glow." Caleb still showed up to the spa in tight suits, fake laughing with vendors like he was running a Fortune 500 company. But inside, the seams were splitting, and I was pulling every thread. I started with the vendors. Most were small business owners I knew through my own work, flooring suppliers, maintenance guys, local distributors. I gave them a heads up. Megan no longer had purchasing power. Any new orders under her name? Flag them. And for anything connected to MSC Enterprises, demand full payment upfront. Some of them didn't need convincing. Word was already getting around. Caleb had been bouncing checks. Then I turned my attention to the expansion. I knew they were trying to open a second spa location. I had the signed proposal, the financing structure, and copies of the fake architect stamps they submitted with the city's renovation paperwork. It was a mess, barely legal, deeply sloppy. So I made sure the right people saw it. Anonymously, I sent the city zoning office a full packet. Every red flag, every conflict of interest. And I didn't have to lie, it was all real. Within 48 hours, an inspector flagged the site. Construction was halted. Meanwhile, I'd prepared something else. Roy helped me draft a formal notification to MSC's listed investors. 2 guys I'd never met, but who had their names on contracts Caleb was trying to push through. The letter outlined the actual ownership history of Megan and company. It highlighted the misrepresentation of assets, use of my residential property without authorization, and violations of business structure laws. Roy signed it. By the end of the week, those investors had gone radio silent on Megan and Caleb. That's when the cracks started to show. Megan came home late one night and dropped her phone on the kitchen counter harder than usual. Her expression was tight. "Something's wrong with the bank," she muttered. "They froze one of our accounts. I didn't look up from my dinner." "That happen often?" She hesitated. "No. It's probably a glitch." I nodded. "Hope so." She didn't ask me anything else, but I could tell her wheels were spinning. The next morning, I got a text from Jordan at the bank. "Thought you'd want to know Megan tried to change the business address on the MSC paperwork. Denied her." She seemed confused. Of course she was, because every document she'd filed, every attempt to claim ownership was built on a lie, and all of it was now being examined. But I wasn't done. Eli, my accountant, had uncovered something even better. A copy of the original operating agreement for Megan and Company. Spa, the one Megan and I signed before opening. And buried on page 2 was a clause I'd forgotten about. If any party transfers assets or makes structural business changes without the written consent of the co-owner, managerial control is automatically forfeited. I had never signed off on Caleb, never approved MSC, never even saw the new documents, until Megan tricked me into signing them under false pretenses. That clause was my ace. All I needed was a trigger, an event that proved misappropriation. And Caleb gave it to me. That same week, he tried to pay for renovation supplies using a credit account tied to my license. It bounced. The supplier called me. I got the invoice. I got the proof. I sent it straight to Roy. "It's done," he said. "We can activate the clause. File within 48 hours. That's when I set the final plan in motion. The investor dinner was coming up, the one where Megan and Caleb planned to celebrate the second location and lock in funding. I was going to let them walk right into it, smiling, toasting, signing papers, and when they did, that was when everything they thought they owned would be pulled right out from under them. The night of the investor dinner, the weather was perfect, calm, quiet, like the world was holding its breath. Megan had spent the afternoon getting her hair done, trying on outfits, spraying herself with a perfume I bought her 2 Christmases ago. Caleb picked her up in a rental Mercedes. I watched them from the upstairs window, sipping coffee, not bitterness, just calm. They thought this was their night. They didn't know it was mine. At exactly 5:15 p.m., I left the house and drove across town to the Oakland Grove Country Club. Not for the dinner. I'd already handled that part. Earlier that day, I met with the club's manager, slid him a sealed envelope and asked for a favor, to make sure copies of all documents signed that evening went through a specific copier on site. One I had access to. He didn't ask questions. Then I made one more call to Roy. "You've got everything?" I asked. "All lined up," he said. "The clause, the financial misappropriation, the misuse of assets. We'll file first thing in the morning. Their signatures tonight will make it airtight." I hung up and smiled. At 6:02, Megan and Caleb arrived at the club. I saw the pictures later. Megan in a sleek red dress, grinning like she'd just won an award. Caleb next to her, holding a folder of papers like a kid about to pitch his first big idea. They were led to a private room, same one I'd arranged earlier. The investors they met were not the real backers Caleb claimed to know. They were 2 consultants I'd hired, men who knew exactly what to say and when to nod. Megan and Caleb talked numbers. They bragged about growth, about the future of MSC. They toasted to leaving the past behind. And then they signed. Right there, in that room, under the illusion that they were locking in a golden future, they signed documents that were now legally meaningless. Because the clause in our original agreement, the one Megan never read, said any major change without co-owner consent meant she forfeited control. And that change had already happened the moment she moved funds into MSC Holdings. She thought this was the peak of her career. It was the beginning of her fall. At 6:47 p.m., Roy filed the papers. I had emailed him the proof, the bounced vendor invoice Caleb tried to push through with my license number. That was all we needed to activate the clause. And just like that, Megan no longer legally owned Megan and Company. But I wasn't done yet. The next step was the transfer. 2 weeks earlier, I'd met someone, Lauren Blake. She used to run a wellness clinic in Michigan before selling it for a fortune. She'd approached me quietly, said she was looking to invest in a new venture but didn't want to run it herself. We made a deal. Lauren became the new managing partner of Megan and Company. On paper, she owned 51%. I retained the rest. Megan? Nothing. That night, while Megan was still laughing over dessert with Caleb, Lauren was officially registered with the Secretary of State's office as the new head of the company Megan had spent years pretending she built. And she didn't even know it yet. By the time the couple returned home, flush with champagne and self-congratulation, the damage was already done. The accounts were locked. The vendors were informed. The lease was no longer being negotiated, because Harold, the landlord, had signed a new one with Lauren's company just hours before. And me? I slept better than I had in years. Not because I'd won, but because I'd finally stopped letting someone else take credit for what I'd built. The fallout didn't come with explosions. Came with quiet confusion. The next morning, I got a message from Jenna, the front desk girl at the spa. "Something's up. Megan just got here. System's down. Her keycard won't work." Perfect. At 8:05 a.m., Lauren filed the ownership transition memo with the spa's vendors and partners. It was professionally written, notarized, and firm. Effective immediately, Megan and Company. Spa is under the management of Blake Wellness, LLC. All previous contracts and agreements are to be reviewed and reauthorized under the new entity. Megan wasn't even mentioned. By 9 a.m., the credit processor froze. By 10:30, 2 shipments were returned due to invalid purchasing accounts. By noon, Caleb stormed out of the back office and started calling vendors, yelling into his phone like a man trying to plug holes in a sinking ship. I wasn't there to see it, but Jenna was, and she recorded everything. The video showed Caleb pacing, sweating through his collar. Megan frantically typing on her laptop, trying to log into accounts that no longer existed. Every password rejected. Every screen locked. Clients started showing up for appointments. One by one, they were turned away. "No access to files," Jenna said. No way to run payments. By mid-afternoon, Megan was on the phone with the bank, trying to figure out why her card wasn't working. Then she called the supplier. Then the building owner. Harold didn't answer. Instead, he'd left a memo on the door, a notice of updated leaseholder. She read it twice. Lauren Blake's name was there in bold. Megan's wasn't. By the time I arrived later that day, just to check in, Caleb was outside, red in the face. "You smug piece of garbage," he muttered when he saw me. "You did this." I didn't rise to it. I just adjusted my sunglasses.
No, Caleb.
"I stopped you from stealing what wasn't yours." He took a step forward. "We'll sue. Be my guest," I said. "You might want to look up the fraud complaints still open against you first." He froze. "And by the way," I added, "you tried to open a second location using forged credentials and someone else's property as collateral. That's not just illegal, that's stupid." I turned to go inside. Megan was sitting alone in the lounge. No music.
No stylists. No clients.
Just her, staring at her phone like it was going to apologize for her. She looked up at me. "You blindsided me," she said, her voice flat. "No," I said. "You blindsided yourself. You built everything on a lie." She stood up. "You can't just take this from me." "I didn't take it. You gave it away. The moment you brought him in. The moment you moved funds without consent. The moment you stopped thinking I mattered." Then I placed a single folder on the front desk. Inside, a termination letter. Her name removed from everything. "Effective immediately," I said.